Hey folks, welcome to another ND add-on tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to be creating this hard surface bracket over here, as well as covering some fundamental practices when doing non-destructive modeling within Blender. There's definitely some tricks and some strategies to follow to get some really nice looking geometry at the end without having to go destructive. So this is what we're going to be making. So this is a bracket, which if we turn off all the modifiers, has just started off as a simple profile, basically three edges. And then obviously by using the power of modifiers, we end up with something like this. And we can have a look at, these are basically the cutters or the utilities we've used to add all of the additional details to this bracket itself. So if you're interested to see how to do this, we're going to be going through this step by step and showing you the whole process from start to finish. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get into it. All right, just to make it a little bit easier for you guys to follow along, I'll quickly show you some of the add-ons I have enabled. So the first thing we'll be using is the ND add-on. This is something we've created. It's just a non-destructive toolkit for Blender. It is free, so you can download it from Gumroad or the Blender Marketplace. I'll leave the links down in the description. Some of the other useful ones, these are ones that are just actually built into Blender. First of all is the modifier tools. There's also the edit mesh tools. And of course, if you don't already have it enabled, the 3D viewport pie menus. And I believe that's all we'll need for today, just so you know exactly what I have, and so you can follow along a little bit easier. Cool. So starting with an absolutely blank scene, the first thing we want to do is create the profile for our bracket. So I'm going to head over to the front view, and I'm going to hit Shift 2 to bring up the ND menu and select a single vertex. Then hit the G key to start moving it around, and I'll just bring it out to about here. Hit E to extrude, bring it across the other side. Now the total length here doesn't matter too much because what we're going to do is if we go to edge select mode, select this edge, hit N to bring up the end panel. Under edit, mesh tools, edge tools, select set edge length. With that, I'm going to type in a value of 120 millimeters and then click OK. This is going to make our edge here exactly 120 millimeters wide. I'll then jump to vertex select mode. I'll select this first vertex over here, hit E to extrude and bring it up to about here. And then just do the same thing on the other side so they're at the same height. Awesome. So if we jump into object mode, this should be the profile you have in front of you now. Kind of looks like a staple. Now with this profile selected, we're going to extrude it out. So we'll hit Shift 2 and go to extrusion and choose profile extrude. We want to do this across the y-axis. So I'll tap R just to switch over to the y-axis. And then I'll just start moving my mouse, or you can use the scroll wheel, or up and down arrow keys, WASD keys will work as well, whatever suits your style. So I'm going to go for about 50 units to start with. That looks about right to me. Awesome. Okay, so the next thing we want to do here is just bevel these inner sort of 90-degree corners here. So the easiest way to do that is if we just jump into edit mode and vertex select mode is to select these two vertices down here and run a bevel, vertex bevel. Now I'm going to make this about, let's say about 10.2 units wide and probably about 6 segments. That looks good to me. One other thing we want to do as well is just round off these two corners on the side. Now, interesting little tip is, because we only have one vertex and we don't actually have two we can select, you can still run a vertex bevel and actually affect both sides. And the reason that works is in Blender, when you start off with a vertex and you extrude out from it, the other vertex that's sort of virtually placed on this side carries across the same properties as the vertex it's sort of spawned from. So with that vertex selected, if we open up the bevels menu here and go vertex bevel, but instead of just clicking on it directly, let's hold down the shift key to place this a little bit later in the modifier stack. We'll then notice if we start moving this around, we actually bevel both vertices there on either end. So that's pretty cool. So I'm going to go about 5 units wide and about maybe 6 segments. So there we go. That looks good. So I'm going to jump back into object mode and have a look at this bracket. All right, so the next thing we want to do is add a bit of thickness to this bracket. So with it selected, I'm going to go to the extrusion menu here and select solidify. Now, obviously this is a bit too big, so I'm just going to hold down the shift key while I move just to be a little bit more precise and bring this down to about, let's say a value of 4. Looks good to me. Now I'm noticing this is looking like a little bit wider than I think I wanted it to be. So what we can do is with it still selected, let's recall this profile extrude and simply just bring it in a little bit. So maybe somewhere around 44.8, 45, something like that. That looks a bit better to me. All right, so that's the first step. The next thing we want to do is cut out sort of two rectangular shaped holes in the bottom of the bracket here. So the easiest way to do that is just go to the top view and go Shift A and add in a new plane. Now what I'm going to do is with this plane selected, let's just hit the G key to start moving it. Then I'm going to click the middle mouse button and sort of drag it along the X axis here just to constrain my movement. I'm going to bring it to about right about here and then go S to scale X across the X axis and maybe make it about this big. And actually might scale it down just overall a little bit more to about here. Awesome. So one thing to remember when you've started to scale things in object mode is the scaling, if we have a look at the item menu here, isn't uniform. So it's not 1, 1, 1. We do want this to be uniform and sort of applied so that if we do things like vertex bevels, they don't act strangely. So easiest way to fix that is just to hit Control A and apply the rotation and the scale. Cool. So the other thing I want to do is to make sure this plane is sitting flush with this top face over here. So I'm going to change my snap mode to face. I hit the G key and the Z key and then start moving it up and down. And then I can hold down the Control key and just sort of hover over this face here, which will just place that plane flush against that face of the bracket here. Awesome. So one last thing I want to do is give this thing some rounded corners. So with it selected, I'm going to go into edit mode, vertex select mode, make sure all 4 vertices are selected, and then run a bevel, vertex bevel. Now I don't want it too big, so it looks like maybe 4.7 will do, and maybe about 6 segments. Looks good to me. Cool. So you should have that in front of you right now. So the last thing we want to do is just add some thickness to this as well. So let's go to the extrusion menu, select solidify, and I'm just going to move this value up and down until it's the total thickness doesn't matter too much. I just want it thick enough so that it goes all the way through the bracket because we're going to use this as a Boolean reference object or a cutting object. Right, so with that in place, let's select that and then shift select the bracket and then run a Boolean difference. So if we hit Alt V and just go hide the utils here for a second, we can see what we have. Awesome. So that's looking good so far. So we want to do the same thing on the other side here, but instead of obviously doing all that work again, what we can do is just bring back the utils, select this, shift select that, select our bracket, and then run a simple mirror operation. And there you go. Awesome. I'm just going to hide these guys again so we can just see the bracket without all the utils in the way. All right, so that's looking pretty good. All right, so the next thing I want to do is sort of cut out a hole on the side of the bracket here. So I'm going to go off to the right view here, just to have a better look at it. Now, we want to spawn or create a Recon Poly right in the center here. Now, we could hold down the Shift key and right click to move the 3D cursor around and try and sort of guesstimate it to get it in the middle, but I want to be a little bit more precise. So what I'm going to do is just click on this object, run a geolift operation, select this face, and then hit the space bar to select it. So this has just extracted that face now for us. With that face selected, let's go to Object, Set Origin, Origin to Center of Mass, Surface. You'll see that moves the origin right to the center of this face that we have extracted. Then I'm going to hit Shift S and go Cursor to Selected. That just makes sure we get our cursor basically dead on the center in here, or as close as we can get it anyway without going to the manual route. Cool. That's all we need that face for. So I'm just going to hit X to delete it and just leave the cursor there in the right spot. I'll go back to the right view here and then just go Shift 2 and create a Recon Poly. Now this is going to be a bit too big to start with, so let's scale this down a little bit and then change these segments. So I'm going to go up to maybe about a value of 32 because I want it to look fairly smooth. And then the overall radius, maybe bring this all the way down to about, what's good? Maybe 12.8, I think looks good to me. Awesome. So I just want to get this 3D cursor out the way. I'm just going to hit Shift S and change it back to world origin. And then with our Recon Poly still selected, let's run a extrusion, solidify. And again, let's just make it big enough so that it goes all the way through the bracket. Cool. Now with it selected, I'm going to shift select the bracket and run another Boolean difference. So we just end up with the hole punched out over there. All right, so the next thing I want to do is create sort of more of a rectangular cutout on this side. So let's head over to the left-hand side. And because the cursor is already at the world origin, let's just go Shift A and create a new mesh plane. Now I want the plane to face the camera. So under the little F9 panel that comes up here, set the alignment to view. So it looks directly at the camera. And then let's just scale this down to about, I don't know, something about that size. Hit G, middle mouse button just to constrain it to the Z axis, and then move it up to about here. And then S to scale, Z again to constrain it. Make it about this big, and then I'm just going to move it down again so it sort of sits roughly about here. Cool. Now this thing is sitting off in the middle of the world here. So what I want to do is kind of bring it up and flush against this face. So similar to what we did with these rectangles down here, we'll hit G, then constrain it along the x-axis, and then hold down the control key to snap it onto that face there while we still have face select mode set up. Cool. So next thing we want to do is let's make sure we apply the rotation and scale so we don't end up with any weird behavior, and then jump into edit mode, vertex select. So grab these two bottom vertices here and then run a vertex bevel. Now I want this to be sort of as far as it can go, so I'm just going to move the value as high as it goes and then set the segment count about, looks like 8 should do the trick here. And jump back into object mode, and again, let's just run an extrusion solidify, make it big enough so it goes all the way through the bracket, and then commit that. All right, with it selected, shift select the bracket again and run a Boolean difference. All right, so you should have something that looks like this right now. So the next thing I want to do is create sort of this moon-shaped cutout here, actually on both sides. So I'm going to head to the top view and create another Recon Poly and set the segments up to a fairly high number, maybe about 42, and set the radius to a number so that it basically is as wide as the bracket itself. Then we'll hit the G key, constrain ourselves to the y-axis, and move this back to about over here, sort of. So this is going to be the area that we're going to cut out here, the sort of half moon sort of shape here. All right, so we want this thing to be aligned with the face here again. So hit G, Z, hold down the control key, and then let's snap it to this face. And then we're going to run a extrusion solidify. Again, just big enough so it goes all the way through the bracket. And I'll shift select the bracket and go Boolean difference. So there we go. That's looking good. So again, we want it to happen on the other side as well. So what I'm going to do is hit Alt V, bring back our utils, select this Recon Poly, shift select the bracket and run a mirror. Now the x-axis isn't the correct one in this case. So I want to hit the R key to go to the y-axis, and it looks like we're on the opposite side. So we hit F to flip that across and then click to confirm. And I'll hit Alt V again and hide the util. So we should have something that looks like this. Cool. So I'm looking at this now, and I think these rectangles are looking a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do is just go to the top view, hit Alt V, bring these utils back, select one of these rectangles, jump into edit mode, select these 4 vertices, and then just scale this down a bit. And you can already see this is, a really nice example of how non-destructive modeling allows you just to make changes really quickly and effectively. We're almost there. We need to do a few bits of cleanup. And one last thing I want to do before we finish up is to run a nice sort of weighted normal bevel around all the edges, because right now they're quite sharp and unrealistic. So one thing I want to talk about here is the geometry that gets created when you do non-destructive modeling. So if we hit Alt V and bring up the wireframes, you'll notice a few things happen. So the first thing is that we have these lines that are running out from the Boolean cutouts. Now, the way Blender works is generally when it knocks a hole out using a Boolean difference, it wants sort of 2 supporting edges, on as part of that Boolean operation. Now, it obviously doesn't know what exactly you're trying to do. It just does its best, job at sort of connecting these edges where it thinks they should be connected. But sometimes it's not sort of in the best place, especially when the angle here between sort of 2 edges becomes a little bit too small. It can add some sort of pinching and weird artifacts when we try and run a bevel later. So one thing while I'm looking at this is let's actually add a couple more cuts in here just to really illustrate this effect. So you might go over to the right-hand side here, and I'm just going to hold down the Shift key and right-click over here just to place the 3D cursor. And let's do another Recon Poly. And let's make this a little bit smaller this time. Maybe segments. Let's go with about 18 and maybe a radius of about 5. I think that looks good. All right, and let's move the cursor back to the world origin, so just out of our way. And then with that Recon Poly selected, let's just do another extrusion solidify and click to confirm that. Now I want to create a copy of this down below here and mirror it across to the other side. So easiest way to do that is with this selected, let's just go to the array cubed operator, tap R until we get to the y-axis, hold Alt, change the count to 2, and then for the offset, just bring this all the way down until it's sitting sort of below this over here. Awesome. And then Shift select the bracket and use the mirror operator. Let's make sure we're on the y-axis, and looks like we need to flip this, and then click to confirm. Cool. With those still selected, let's Shift click on the bracket here, Shift 2, and do a Boolean difference again so we get these extra cutouts. There you go, just a little bit more detail, but hopefully now if we bring these wireframes back, you can see, okay, here's a better example of some of the issues we might face. So for instance, this edge here, the way it connects is getting a bit tight. So if we try to run a bevel, this would probably cause a bit of pinching, so with this edge down here. This edge is also getting a bit too sharp, or the angle, and so forth. So we need to clean this up a little bit if we want to have like an effective bevel placed across this object. And again, we're working non-destructively, so we can't just go into edit mode and create new edges where we want to. We have to sort of use a few little tricks. So the first trick we're going to do is if we select this bracket and jump into edit mode, what I'm going to do is also under the modifiers here, let's just toggle the stack and turn on all of this so we can see kind of the effect of all the modifiers while we're in edit mode. So the first thing I want to do is run sort of a perfectly horizontal edge all the way through the center here to support this circular cutout, the larger detail here. Now, the easiest way to do that is to go into edge select mode and select this edge that's running up and down. So this is the original profile that we can see under the hood here. With that edge selected, I'm going to hit Control E and run a subdivide. Now, if you're seeing this and you're looking and going, what the heck? Don't worry, that's expected. So I'll explain in a second why that's happening. But just to help clean this up and make it a bit more easier to see what we're doing, I'm going to go to Vertex Select mode, select that new vertex that was placed in the center there, hit Alt-T to bring up the Utils menu, or you can go Shift-2 and go down to Utils, and just make sure we select Clear Vertex Groups, and that should clean that up quite a bit. So what was happening there, just so you understand why that effect occurred, is like we said with the rounded corners at the top here, when we use extrusions and bevel, so whether it's solidify, screw, profile extrude, that sort of thing. The information from the vertex on this side got pulled across to the other side. Now, the same thing happened when we added this new vertex here. It basically took the information about the vertex at the top, which had these rounded sort of corners or bevels applied, plus the information of the vertex down the bottom, which had this other larger bevel applied. And obviously, with that vertex in the middle holding the information of both of those, it just created a bit of chaos. So the easiest way to clear that and fix it up is just to run Alt-T and select Clear Vertex Groups. And that just gives you basically like a vanilla, plain, standard vertex there without the information of the other two, creating a bit of havoc. All right, so one other thing I want to do is while we still have this selected and in edit mode, let's go add a new modifier and select the weld modifier. Now, it might look like it messed up your geometry a little bit. That's fine. It's just because the distance is a little bit too high. Let's select this and change this to sort of 0.1 and hit enter. Now, with that in place, let's just select the center vertex here and double tap G to just start moving it along. And what we want to do is sort of align it with this edge over here. So if I double tap G again to start moving, you'll see as it gets close, it eventually kind of snaps into place. And that's because this weld modifier is taking effect and sort of gluing the two overlapping vertices there together. So if we move this along, you see how it sort of disconnects. As it gets close enough, it snaps, and then it looks like they're connected. And you go low enough, again, it unconnects. So you want to move it up until it snaps, and it's just sort of sitting right in the middle here. And then we can click to confirm. Let's go to X-ray mode. Now you can see we actually got this really nice horizontal line going all the way through, and obviously the angle now between the edges where these points join up is sort of much more open. Will give us more room to play with when we do the bevels shortly. All right, so we just want to repeat this process now for the other cutouts here. So again, let's go to edge mode, select this top edge, hit Control E and subdivide. I'm going to go into vertex mode, Alt Z just to see this better. And again, let's select this vertex, Alt T, clear vertex group so we don't get the craziness happening again. And then double tap G and just move this up until we get it connecting with the edges on this side here. Now, it looks like these things could probably be moved up slightly, but let's just run with this for now and see how we go. All right, so one last one we want to do is for these the bottom two cutouts here. So go to edge mode, select this, Control E, subdivide, back into vertex mode. Let's select this, Alt T, clear vertex groups, and then let's just get a better view. Double tap G and slide this up until it connects with the edges on this side here. So if I get back to object mode now, you can see we got some really nice horizontal cuts going through here. No longer do we have these sort of edges going off at sort of 45 or sort of more acute angles. This is exactly what we want. This gives us a much nicer geometry and sort of a better slate for running bevels and other bits of cleanup at the end. So there's probably a few other things we can do here as well. So I'm noticing these two edges here probably look a bit out of place. I don't like how close they are together there. And obviously the angles coming off of these edges here aren't too great either. So the easiest way to fix these ones here, I'm just going to hit Alt V, bring back the utils, select this big Recon Poly we have over here. I'm going to hit G and then Y just to constrain us to the Y axis. Then hold down the Shift key and just move it back and just keep moving back until the edge sort of overlaps there like such. All right, cool. So let's hit Alt V and hide our utils again. And that looks much better, just a nicer, sharper, cleaner edge there. And actually helps with the shading a little bit too. All right, so one last thing we want to do is run some edges through here just to help sort of align or tell Blender to sort of, use our sort of preferred edge instead of running this sort of sharp edge off the corner here. So again, let's select the bracket, go into edit mode, go into edge select, select this edge in here, Control E, subdivide, and go into vertex select mode. I'm going to hit Alt Z just to be able to see this better. Again, I'm going to select this new vertex, Alt T, clear vertex groups, and then double tap G to start sliding it across. And what we could do is just basically line it up with this edge over here. So if we double tap G, you can see we can sort of get it to snap there. And sort of, it's almost in the center of this, lines up with that edge really nicely. And that's, I think, a much cleaner looking result. So let's just repeat that for the other side. I'm going to go back to edge select mode, select this edge, Control E, subdivide, vertex mode, select that, Alt T, clear vertex groups, and then begin moving this across until we sort of line up with a nice edge there. Actually, let's go a bit further. It looks like we went one edge over with the other one. So double tap G and let's bring it all the way out to, oops, double tap G. About, this is a bit tricky sometimes. I'm going to hold down Shift until I get it. There we go. Just snapping in the right place. Cool. So I'm going to jump back into object mode, hit Alt V, hide the wireframes, and Alt Z to go back into solid shading. All right, so I think that's looking really good now. And if we hit Alt V, go to wireframes again, we got some really nice, clean, non-destructive geometry now without any sort of harsh angles coming off the edges. All right, so the last thing we want to do is I'm going to select this and then run a uh, weighted normal bevel. So with that, I'm going to bring this value down to about maybe zero point 0.4, I think looks good. That'll just help highlight those edges really nicely with the lighting, and also just ensure that we're not having like really infinitely sharp edges on the bracket here, which just doesn't really look great. Not realistic either. Awesome. So that's about it. So I think I'd call it a day there. That's a really nice looking bracket, completely non-destructive, and some really nice looking non-destructive geometry as well. If we just take a step back and see what we've done, so if we toggle the stack here, you can see there's a whole heap of modifiers, but if we turn them off, all we have fundamentally is this original profile. And then step by step, as we go through, we start adding, I guess, shape and form to our object. And by the time we're done, we ended up with this bracket. And if also we unhide our utils and our cutters, you can see we have all these things still in place if we wanted to move things around, change sizes, Otherwise sort of adjust the overall look and feel of our object. It's really easy to do, and we don't have to do any sort of manual poly modeling, at least not too much anyway. Awesome. Well, I hope you guys enjoy that. If you'd like to see more tutorials like this, especially covering some of the more fundamental aspects of non-destructive modeling, please leave a comment down below. Now, we won't just be doing brackets the whole time. This is just sort of an easy way to sort of explain these concepts at sort of a beginner level. We do have plans to do a lot more sort of intermediate and advanced tutorials as well, so look out for those. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this. Have fun, and I'd love to see what you guys are making with ND. If you want to share with me in Discord, or even leave a comment on YouTube as well. Anyway, enjoy. Happy modeling.